Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and Fred Carroll. An addiction recovery and mental wellness discussion. Everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach podcast with Scott H. Silverman and me, Fred Carroll. Today we're going to talk to a new friend named Garret Biss, who from Unspoken.vet is what I'm seeing down there underneath this thing. Explain to us what that is. Explain to us who you are, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So Garret Biss, I'm a Marine Corps veteran, I've got to throw it in there, former pilot in the Marine Corps. I've got a lot of friends that make fun of me because that's the way I introduce myself, but it is what it is. Unspoken.vet. So recently I had the pleasure of being invited to deliver a TEDx talk, and that was the theme of it, was talking about the trauma of military transition and the look at what veterans lose, why we're kind of unprepared for it, and the consequence a lot of veterans face, which leads many to, Scott, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, the significantly increased rates of mental health challenges and a substance use disorder with the veteran population. And that website, the unspokentrauma.vet, it is a website where you can go and see the TEDx talk if you're interested.
Excellent. I think you and Scott it almost sounds like I'm talking to Scott, because exactly what you just said seems to be a lot of what Scott does, and that's getting people. So Scott, explain to him what you do on your end of things with the military.
Thanks, Fred. So how you doing, Fred, before we jump into it?
I'm great, Scott. I'm energetic today. I've got a fire in me.
Yeah. Is that espresso in your A&W bottle, or is that just A&W root beer you're drinking? So
it's A&W cream soda, and I don't think it has caffeine in it. I think it's caffeine free, so I'm fine.
Yeah, for the record, Garret, Fred likes to call himself a normie, so we always like to do a UA before we do the show to make sure he's with us. So
yes,
anyway, welcome to you, Garret, and thank you for your service. What I do is I'm in San Diego. We run a treatment center called Confidential Recovery, and we have a nonprofit called the Veterans Navigation Center. I personally am not a veteran, and I want to thank you for your service. And it's okay to mention you're a pilot, because isn't that kind of an exclusive group? Not many people can get to that level of skill. My colleague who runs my organization with me is a Navy retired commander. So half our team are veterans and half are in recovery. 90% of our clients are veterans. So I'm real familiar with the PTS and untreated trauma and what PTS can do to the family. And we're in San Diego, where we're the fourth largest vet population per capita in the country, and half our veterans don't even have insurance. So part of the reason we created this nonprofit a couple of years ago is to do outreach and work with veterans to try to help them really navigate the system. And I'm sure I'd love to hear your experience about, when you made your transition, because there seems to be a lot you learn when you go into the military. And the day you get out, you get a little orientation, and then it's like goodbye. We have a pretty strong VA presence here, but they have a $230 billion budget. But most of the vets we serve, A, don't go there. B, have tried, had a bad experience. But I was just talking to the colleague the other day. She's been out of the service 18 years, a Marine, and she said, I never went to the VA. I never even really thought about it. I had a job, was working, and had some insurance. But now she said there's a need as I get older, and I'm just starting to learn how to navigate, which is just fascinating. So where does that $230 billion go? Probably pays a lot of doctors, a lot of admin staff, and a lot of people that write reports for the federal government to keep that line item going. So, but today's about you, brother. So tell us, and congratulations on your TEDx. I did one years ago, but probably before you were born. And it was a great experience. I'm sure you had a great one as well. They've really fine-tuned it, and probably one of the biggest networks next to Rotary International in the world, where people get a chance to, really hone their message and share it with others. And then, it becomes part of who you are and everywhere you go. So I'll get your website. I'll look forward to taking a look at it. So tell us what you do, and what's more important to me is why. And what keeps you moving. So, today, again, this is about you, and we want to know and learn from you, and knowing that our audience, we'll take this, we'll put it on our website. We're going to put it on my website. We'll show it to our vets and their families, because I think that's an important piece on 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago, talked about PTS, untreated bleeds over to the entire family. And we've known that for
Absolutely.
years. And when you look at the suicide rate, with veterans, and what's even more scary to me is, according to the studies, 80% of those who take their lives have not even checked into a VA to get access to support. And people go, well, how do you get that data? Well, once you're in the military, you're in the system. And if you expire for unexplained reasons, and anybody asks the question, they can check very easily whether, did Bob actually go see somebody for help and ask for it? So anyway, so back to you. So what do you do, and why do you do it? Floor is yours.
Yeah. So real quick for my notes, Scott, what's the name of the organization that you have for veterans?
We Confidential Recovery is our SUD, and we are funded through TriWest, which is the main administrator, and then veteransnavigationcenter.org, vnc.org. We created that a couple of years ago to give veterans kind of a doorway to come in, and then once they graduate, when the benefits sunset, we transition them over to the nonprofit so we can continue their support, because you can't fix anything in 30 days, and no matter what
Right.
the
Are you sure you can't? Because I've read on a lot of treatment websites that 28, 30 days, you're good.
Well, no, actually you are, but there is a 95% documented failure rate that sits right there. So you're absolutely right. It's only
I
a 45
have a very dry sense of humor that I brought from the military. So I try to at least to let people know that I'm joking with a little smile, but it took years to even get that. People just thought I was really weird for a while.
Well, I resemble that remark, and I'll tell you, it's a $45 billion industry, okay, with a 95% failure rate. And that is the industry's data. Now, there isn't a treatment center that I'm aware of that keeps data because they just don't want to. And, the insurance industry, unfortunately, has failed at every turn. So it's kind of nice to work with TriWest and with the VA, because technically they come across as if they really care. The problem is it's just getting them at the table. So, but your cynicism and your comedic side of it's real important, because if we don't laugh at the insanity, we get sucked up to it. So anyway, so again, back to you.
I can argue all sides of that issue, and I'm also familiar with that statistic. And here's the thought that I come back to. If somebody is 95% failure rate, but of what constitutes a failure? Because yes, that might be true for people that return to use, certainly. And for some of those individuals, I will argue that their life has improved in some regard. So maybe they did return to use, maybe their life's not where they want it to be, but their life is improving. That's something I bring up a lot when people talk about the 12 steps and the very low absolute sobriety rates from that. Okay, if that's the failure, if that's the metric that you're considering a failure, okay, I get it, but let's also look at individuals whose lives have improved. And on the flip side of that, we look at all the veterans that are out there struggling, and this kind of answers one of those questions of why do I do this? There's a number of veterans that are struggling, and to the point that they become a statistic of somebody that struggled with substance use disorder or been diagnosed with a mental health issue. And that's very unfortunate. There's a lot that I work on to support that. But there's also a lot of individuals, a lot of veterans specifically, who just aren't living a good version of their life. They're not suffering to the point that they're in a diagnosable condition, but they're certainly not living the best version of their life. They're certainly not getting from life what they want, and they're certainly not making the contribution and the impact in their community and their workforce that they want to. So that's something I also try to keep in mind, even if somebody's not, hasn't been diagnosed. Okay, maybe there's some individuals that are in denial, and there's also a lot of individuals that just haven't really crossed that line or haven't reached out and sought help. And I think that also ties back to a little bit of an answer as to why so few veterans seek help through the VA, because, and this is, I'll stereotype here, but especially men, what I've seen, what I've experienced myself, things have to get really bad before we'll reach out for help. And then once things improve a little bit, then maybe we'll stop seeking help. That doesn't mean there isn't more work to do. It just means that whether it's, pride, ego, whether it's machismo, whatever it is that tells us, okay, just suck it up and kind of keep marching forward. And that's really, this is men and women in the military. That's something that's ingrained in the military culture is, suck it up, get back to the mission and keep moving forward. And unfortunately, when that carries over in the civilian world after transition, that's an enormous barrier to people relieving some of the pain, relieving some of the suffering that they're in until it's too steep of an uphill climb to make.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Let me quantify something, because you made a good point. according to the statistics that I rattled off, is 15% of this country has people are predisposed for an active addiction issue, similar to diabetes. Of the 15% that seek help, only that have the disease, only 10% will seek help. If an individual does a 30-day program and that's all they do, they have a 95% chance of relapsing. It's not a failure, it's a relapse. So untreated, and then most people who go through treatment, who peel back the onion, if you will, or go to therapy and peel back the onion, but stop when the real stuff bubbles up. My colleague likes to say, it's like a fully loaded station wagon. Once you get sober, you hit the brakes and everything in the back comes rolling forward. So that's the process. So I want to correct myself. It's a 95% relapse rate for those who do not continue any kind of treatment or any kind of behavioral support or any kind of, seeking of dealing with the underlying issues that may be contributing. Because there are a lot of people who abuse things who don't have an active addiction, and they may just be kind of out there having, periods of time where things are great, but something keeps popping up. Something keeps interfering in their life. Something keeps destroying relationships or causing them to act out or substitute. And then if that goes untreated over time, it doesn't get better on its own.
Right.
So I don't disagree with you thinking. I hope
Certainly.
that helps a bit.
No, yeah, certainly. No, and I agree. And I was just kind of pointing out a difference of perspective on those statistics. And to that point, I've worked with individuals that maybe they never return to use for their drug of choice, but I still wouldn't consider them in recovery. They're still suffering. There's still a lot of things that are bubbling up that they're not able to deal with, or they're finding other mechanisms or other ways to numb, avoid, escape, the challenges that are in their life. And that's equally unfortunate, in my eyes, the dry drunk or the individual that, they just find a lot of replacement addiction, maybe more socially acceptable replacement addictions. Maybe they become a workaholic, or they, take on something else that also creates negative consequences in their life. I like to kind of peel back and look more at the roots of either the challenge that is taking place or the healing and the growth that's taking place, and try to infuse that, at least in my perspective, as I'm researching things and working with individuals and any conversations that I have. So I do go out and speak with the community quite a bit because I run a recovery residence in North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina. So a lot of my time with the recovery residents is out talking to the community and helping them better understand the challenges of substance use disorder addiction, what it is, what it looks like, the many different ways that it can show up, why people are struggling with it, and most importantly, why there's not a one solution, one fits all solution to somebody's challenge. Because as you quoted some of the statistics, I've seen that as many as 28 to 30 million Americans are abusing a substance, maybe to the point where they're a diagnosable condition. But that's 30 million different adults. That's 30 million different stories, 30 million different life paths that got them into that place. Whether it's experiences, circumstances, genetics, what have you, there's 30 million different combinations of struggle that got somebody to where they are. There's not going to be one, there's not going to be 10, there's not going to be 100 viable pathways out of that darkness. There's going to be as many as there are individuals that are struggling with it. So that, I think that's an important thing to understand when I'm working with somebody, when I'm trying to point somebody in the direction of resources. And also something very important for individuals to understand, because we're humans are comparing machines. Like, we like to find meaning in things, and we like to compare either our results or the results of other people. And one of the challenges I find with a lot of individuals in early recovery is that they're comparing their journey and their growth or lack of growth, or change or lack of change, to somebody else. And when we're trying to find a sense of meaning for, okay, why do I continue to struggle? Why have I not made the progress as these other people in my group or these other individuals in the community? If we can't come up with a reason, if we can't identify why we're not making the progress that others are, I think our de facto answer to ourselves is that, oh, I'm just so defective, or, oh, I just deserve it, or, oh, I'm beyond help, I'm not going to get better. And that's absolutely not true. It's just that you haven't found your right combination of tools, resources, and support to make the growth and the progress that you want.
So, Garret, are you a recovering addict yourself?
I am. I'm recovering from a lot of things that I've used in my time to avoid, escape, or numb. And one of the interesting things maybe about my journey was that I didn't go to a traditional treatment, and I didn't seek traditional help for the substances and the behaviors that I was abusing. My path and my journey was maybe in a more roundabout way. I sought help. I got some coaching and some mentoring, positive psychology based mentoring that helped me kind of put my life back together first, to develop the sense of self-worth and the self-esteem and find meaning and purpose, and really begin to create a life that I didn't want to avoid or escape or numb from anymore. And it became apparent to me how much those substances or behaviors were costing me, and it was a cost I wasn't willing to pay anymore. So maybe that's a little bit backwards to a way a lot of individuals go through their treatment and their recovery journey. But what that experience provided me was a little bit of insight into some of the challenges that individuals face when they start their recovery journey. So I brought that perspective and that knowledge into the work that I do, both as a recovery coach and then how we design and how we run our recovery residence.
Yeah, because Scott, you often talk about how it's not so much, it's whether or not it works, what works for the individual. And if that worked for you, that's great. And like you were just saying, everybody's so different. We got 30 million people, 30 different ways that you could do it. And you found your connection. You found the way that worked for you. So that's great.
I agree with you. One size does not fit all. And, it's interesting when you use that number, because we just had a guest on just 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, that talked about the whole family. And that's not a part of what, and then you put stigma out there with family. And so if there's 30 million people who are suffering, there's 30 million families that are suffering. And so if the average family has an average of 4 people in it, just in the nuclear family, that's 120 million people. And it was, I just did a brief interview preparing today that CDC just came out and said that the overdose morbidity rate is down for the first time since 2023, which I don't believe, but they say 125 million Americans actually know of somebody that either they've met or they know really well, or, at least peripherally, that has overdosed and died. So when you think about that, I don't even think that many people knew about the COVID morbidity rate. They knew there was COVID going on, but maybe didn't know somebody. So we're some interesting times, to your point. And to me, any modality that can be of help to somebody. And look, my typical customer suffers from disease of denial, doesn't want to pay a $20 copay, doesn't have time to go to treatment because they're busy, and they are treatment resistant. I mean, think about a customer like that, doesn't want your help, doesn't think they need your help, and that if everybody just listened to them differently, they'd be flowing in life in a great way. So, it's interesting, the whole disease around, I call it addiction, and the things that go along with that and the families that are impacted. And another interesting number that I've learned in my years of doing this, for every person who suffers and it is not going untreated, they're impacting 8 people negatively every day. So if 15% of the country has an active addiction issue that will explode over the next year, they're impacting another 85% of the population. So in reality, we have, there was an article came out, I think in January, said 97% of America has a mental health issue. I can't find that article, but I remember reading it thinking, geez, I want to meet the 3%.
I want to meet that 3%.
I do too. And get in a motorhome and travel around the world with them. I think it'd be fun.
Absolutely. And to your point about the 120 million, when I go out in the community, I'm talking with churches, service clubs, I say, that's 120 million, certainly with direct family connection, but that's also, but now think about the neighbors, think about the coworkers, think about the organizations, think about, the service clubs that they're all a part of. That's I think every American is touched in some way, negatively impacted by someone's, struggle with substance use disorder. And we,
absolutely.
Running a recovery residence, we always worry about the NIMBYs, or the people that don't want that sort of facility around where they live. It's in a residential environment. My joke is always, well, at least there's one house in the community that people aren't actively using. You can't say that about any other house on this street or in this neighborhood.
Well, do you find, Garret, do you find that when you go to the churches, to the church groups, do you find that they're a little more blind to what's going on because they're putting so much faith in something else? They don't think it's happening here. Do you find that like they hide
Maybe a
behind the
silver
religion.
lining of the number of overdoses that are being reported now. If there is a silver lining to it, I think it's that it's spreading awareness. So now people, maybe they don't think that it's affecting them or their family, but they realize that they're not so far removed from it. It's not something that happens to the others anymore. It's something that happens to everybody.
Yeah, because I had this conversation with my father. My father happens to be a Mormon, and most of my family, a lot of my family is. I am not, but my father, who's elderly, and he was talking as if, yeah, it's happening there, but not here. And I had to have the tough conversation of growing up in the Mormon era church and how much was being presented to me at these church dances. Just like every kid, I don't care if they're Mormon kids or non-religious kids, they're doing the same stuff. The same feelings are there. The alcohol is being hidden. I remember seeing cocaine, and just going into the 80s and stuff. But he was a little blind to it, and I don't know if that was age specific or religion specific. And it doesn't become an argument anymore. It used to be. We used to argue a lot religiously. Now we respect each other, I guess is the word. But do you see that? Is that a common thing where either elderly because of age or because of religion, they think it's not happening to them?
Maybe a little bit. And one of the things I try to do when I'm presenting is I think of addiction as it's a human issue. It's not something that happens to just some individuals. I believe that I've found that all of us seek something external to our body in order to create or synthesize an internal response. And I believe that is, for some unfortunate individuals, the thing that they reach for has much more dire consequences than somebody else. But I think it's natural to realize, especially, once we realize that, hey, I do this thing and now I feel better. We learn that when we're toddlers, that, hey, there's this thing that I do and then I feel better inside. Well, I believe addiction is manifests at its worst when we're relying on something external to us in order to create an internal situation or experience that we want. And when I'm out in the community talking, I'm saying, it's a difference in degree, but not a difference in kind for somebody who is spending all of their money or, racking up credit card debt or overeating or overworking or Netflix binging too much. If you're experiencing a negative consequence in your life because of something that you're engaged in, that's addiction. I mean, that's, if you're not willing to give it up or if you have a hard time giving it up, I mean, that's what the root of addiction is. For some individuals, their thing has much more severe consequences or much greater addictive hooks to it. And there's some things that I believe we arbitrarily identify as the addictive substances, but really it's something that many of us face or we all face at periods in our life. And when presented in that way, you see a lot of heads nodding and a lot of eyes kind of opening up like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. But yes, I can also see things in my own life that I don't like, or there's outcomes that I'm experiencing that I don't like. And now I can see maybe that there's a behavior that is preventing me from experiencing that outcome. So I don't know, maybe present it in that way. It helps humanize it a little bit and helps foster a little bit more compassion and understanding for those that are really, really struggling with some hard substances.
Yeah, I think the message, I will say this, I do think the message is getting to, it could be a combination of anything. It could be my own family's trauma and stuff, but the conversations I'm now allowed or okay having with my father weren't conversations we could have 10 years ago. So whether that's both of us maturing, both of us respecting each other, or both of us learning through those 10 years that it's okay to talk about this, that it's okay to have trauma, it's okay to talk about mistakes. So I see the positive there. I like these conversations with my father because they're not arguments all the time. They could turn into arguments, but we both have learned when to not push so hard, to listen.
Yeah.
I had an old friend that was a kind of a fitness guy, and then he got into being a triathlete. And I used to see him, and we'd go out to dinner sometimes, and he would talk about his routine. 4 hours of swimming, 3 hours of running, 4 hours of bike riding daily. And I used to think in my head, because somebody who kind of looks at things through a compulsive obsessive lens, because I suffer from this disease of addiction, and and it's just a wiring in my brain. I don't think I ever woke up one day and said to my mom and dad, "Hey, do you mind terribly if I become an alcoholic and a drug addict?" I didn't get a choice. And just like
Yeah.
diabetes, you don't get a choice. But the stigma around people who suffer from it, you just, it's that maladaptive behavior. People don't warmly just say, "Oh, gee whiz, you have to be ready." And you don't. When you have a heart attack, that's not scheduled and it's not planned and it's not chosen, but we treat someone completely differently. You go in for
Right.
care, you got physical therapy, diet change, case management, follow-up, but it doesn't happen, unfortunately, when people are mood altering, taking things in and self-anesthetizing themselves. And the internet became a huge platform for young people during COVID. The average person that went from 3 hours a day jumped up to 8 hours a day. And that's really influencing our young people to make
Mhm.
inappropriate decision-making process. And, you look at gambling and the way it's grown in our country and online and things of that nature. That's where I think that study came from, that 97% of the people, because, I think you kind of said it in your way, that we all want to feel good. I mean, we all want the same thing. We all want a happy, joyous, and free life. We want a solid relationship. We want people to love us, I think, anyway.
Mhm.
My meeting this, and I go to 6 meetings a week still, via Zoom, because I want to preserve the integrity of the efficacy of what's important to me in my life and be present for my wife and my family and my kids. And, hopefully one day dance at their weddings. Although, I don't like some of the men they meet, but I can only have so much influence as a dad, and
Sure.
do what I can. But if I'm a good example for others, then you do what you can do, and you be present for those, and set your own boundaries, because self-care is important too, especially
Right.
for people that are in the helping people business, because there's a huge amount of burnout, and I've watched people struggle. I mean, therapists have their own recovery program, doctors have them, pilots have them,
Mhm.
military people have them, and they sit in their own rooms trying to figure out ways to get better, be better, and be of service to others. So, and I think that's what's important. So Garret, tell me, what is it you like most about what you do?
What is it that I like most about what I do? I think it just feels like the best use of my energy and of my time. So
Okay.
wherever I can make the greatest impact, and I feel like somebody, when I first got out of the Marine Corps, I was doing some coaching and doing some speaking more on leadership development and personal growth. And what I realized was the impact that I might make with somebody. So somebody who's doing pretty well, the average middle class person, well employed, doing well. If I can help them shift some things in their life and do a little bit better, okay, that's going to make some positive net good impact on the world. If I can take somebody that's right at that line or crossing that line of addiction, we look at all the impacts that they're having on other people's lives, on their community, the amount of suffering that they're having. If I can help somebody who's just gotten themselves out of the gutter, just found their way out of the gutter, if I can help them move up the mountain and experience a much better version of their life, then it doesn't just impact them, it impacts all those people that are around them. So I think that's what I enjoy about it the most. It feels like the most leverage I can get for my time and my contribution, by helping in that way, or helping those individuals.
So
So
tell me
what do
the
you
other,
have? Oh,
tell
go
me the
ahead,
other,
Scott.
tell me the other side of that. What do you like least? What is it that irritates you the most about what you do sometimes that you'd like to change if you could?
I feel like I can never do enough. I get many more ideas and many more opportunities than I could ever pursue and fulfill. And things tend to take a lot longer than when the idea comes. The effort of manifesting or materializing something seems to take a lot more effort. So if I had 10 of me, then I could do a lot more things. I think that's probably what it is. And also, as you work with more people and you develop a compassion and understanding, I can feel the pain and suffering of people that I'm around. And it saddens me to be able to see maybe somebody's a solution to it, or maybe see somebody's truth when they're not able to see it for themselves, their value and their truth, and just knowing that they're suffering, and many times not being able to do something directly to impact that.
Yeah,
Can you
sometimes
give
the
me
hard.
a quick Can you give me a quick rundown of the books that you have written and a brief bio on them?
Certainly. So, First Steps to Thriving in Recovery. It's a book that offers some positivity focused and strengths based interventions to help individuals in their recovery journey. And this can be a great complement to doing step work. It's been used by therapists. It's been used in SEOPs as part of the curriculum. But what it looks at is identifying. So it's a short book. It's very simple exercises, but it works at increasing somebody's self-worth, their value, their efficacy, and giving them a little bit of direction. I find a lot of people early in recovery, as they've removed a coping mechanism, they've removed that thing that helps them numb the pain of thinking about how much they wish their life was better, how much they wish they were better. This is one of the steps that we talk about in here, is giving ourselves credit where credit is due. So not just listing all of the defects and all the things that you'd like to change about yourself, because when we do that, it can be cathartic, it can be effective, it's very necessary, but it doesn't often make us feel very good when we're just looking at all the things that are bad about us. So there's a complementary exercise in here where we list and identify many of the wins and successes that we've had in our life, and identify the innate strengths that we have, the character strengths that we have, because this is where I find we get the fuel to continue to do the work, in our recovery and moving forward.
So
Excellent.
tell me, personal question. Is that you in the picture?
It's not. It's funny. A lot of people think that. It was a picture I got off of Unsplash. But yeah, now that I've had a lot of friends ask me, like, where was that mountain? Where did you go? Like, oh no, it wasn't me.
That's funny. Yeah, I was just teasing, because
maybe I'll start telling people it was. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a new cover in the future and make it me.
Yeah. Well, you could probably say it's you anyway, couldn't you? Right? You were the model, but you used somebody else because you had stomach flu that day when the photographer went up on the mountain.
Yeah, that's it.
So you're a Delaware-born person?
That's correct. Yes.
And now live in North Carolina, you said?
That's right. Right near Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point. It was my last duty station, and where I decided to stay afterwards.
What town is that over in North Carolina?
It's in Newbern, about 2 hours east of Raleigh, Durham.
Okay. So up northeast of North Carolina, right?
It's about central.
Central. Okay.
From south to north, it's right about in the center.
Okay.
So I have one more question, Fred,
Go ahead.
for Garret. So Garret, what question have we not asked you that we should ask you before you go?
What color socks am I wearing today? No, I've got no idea. Maybe the question is, what do I get into in the TED Talk, or what is the unspoken trauma all about?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. That's the question.
Do we still have time? Do you want me to answer that? Okay.
Yep.
So the unspoken trauma.
So the question, we want to get your final soundbite and what it is you want to leave us with that's most important. And then we want your contact info as well, so people can reach you.
Absolutely. Yeah, certainly. So unspoken trauma, what I talk about and I deliver in my TEDx talk is looking at the transition from military service and why it's so stressful and traumatic for some individuals. And what I realized is that when we look at the statistics of veterans, there's about a 200% greater chance for veterans to struggle with mental health challenges or suffer with addiction. And there's a 57% more likelihood of taking your own life by suicide. And that number is increasing, unfortunately. And what I realized was that, yes, there are certainly veterans who struggle with traumatic experiences on the battlefield or in service, maybe a sexual trauma or something they experienced in service, which leads to that challenges after the military. There's also a lot of individuals that the transition from military service itself was the trauma or was traumatic. When I look at what all human needs require, we have three basic human needs. One is for connection. So beyond our needs for water, food, shelter, we have a need for connection. We have a need for connection to others in order to survive, in order to thrive. We also have a need with that connection. We have a need for authenticity. So we have a need to be able to show up and express our truth and know that we can say what we want, ask for what we need, and still be accepted as part of that tribe that we're involved in. Because if we don't have that authenticity, then we get connection, but we get connection that comes with fear that they're going to find something out about me and I'll lose that connection, or fear that they're going to kick me out of this tribe and I won't have that connection. The last need that I talk about is our need for meaning. So Viktor Frankl, in the work of logotherapy and the will to meaning, looks at how the sense of meaning in our life provides our capacity to endure suffering. And for many individuals that were called into the military, they're called in for a sense of service, a contribution that they want to make to our country, protecting our family. And for most veterans, when they transition out of the service, they're never able to replace that sense of meaning. They can't find anything that seems to have as much meaning or purpose as serving the military. And without that sense of meaning, there's a loss of capacity in order to endure the hard times in life. It's our strong sense of meaning that allows us to do things that are difficult and overcome difficult and challenging times. Without that sense of meaning, there's still going to be ups and downs in life. There's still going to be challenges and obstacles that we have to overcome. But without that sense of meaning, or that lost sense of meaning, there's a lost capacity to endure those hard times. So very quickly, often unprepared for that transition, very quickly, military members go from a strong sense of connection and authenticity, an ability to express who they are and who they've become, what their identity is, and a strong sense of meaning. And very quickly, we lose all three of those. And I believe that's a major contributing factor to why so many veterans either have that, they suffer to the point where they experience that mental health diagnosis, or they're struggling with addiction, or they're just don't show up and just don't enjoy life to its fullest. They don't feel like they're their best version of themselves, and they're not getting as much from life as they want.
That's excellent. Yeah, I was just on the page. I just shared it with you, Scott, the page from Unspoken Trauma. And yeah, it's great. Now, what did it take you when you were getting ready to do a TEDx? How long did it actually take you did you speak in front of the mirror? Did you practice? Did you go out on the road?
Every
like
day, multiple times a day. Yeah. I think fortunately for me, I only had a month's heads up that I was going to give a TEDx. So I'd had a talk that I'd, exercised a little bit before, but I only really had a month. So it was about 2 to 3 weeks of narrowing down and fine tuning the script, and then lots and lots of practice. So Zoom calls with anybody who would jump on a Zoom and watch me rehearse it. Many friends that I would pull into a room. Hey, you got 10 minutes? Come listen to this. So I think it was 4 or 5 times a day I was rehearsing it up to, during that last week.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So before we do end this, I think you're great. I think you're a great speaker. I think you represent yourself so well, and we appreciate your time and your efforts and your past, everything. You've done good. Your parents should be proud. Okay.
Thank you.
Your parents should be proud. Scott's proud. Yeah. I'm proud. But
Right.
where could people reach out to connect with you?
Certainly on LinkedIn, on that website, unspokentrauma.vet. And there's an opportunity there if you watch the talk and it inspires you, or you feel like other people will benefit and you want to host a watch party. That's something that I offer, so we can all jump on a Zoom room, or if you're local, I can come in person and just experience some sharing and some Q&A afterwards. I've found that a lot of healing and help comes from the ability to be able to share things that we're thinking about or things that are on our mind. So I'd love to offer that opportunity for any of your listeners who would be interested in that. You can also go to garretbiss.com and find ways to connect with me there. And if there's any ideas that you have, any ways that you'd like to collaborate, then I invite you to please reach out to me and let's see what we can do to make an impact.
Excellent. And I'll share all these connections to anybody in the show notes. They could click on them and go say hello to Garret or watch his videos or whatever you want to. But this video will be up later in the week. You got anything else, Scott, before we end it?
No, I think great podcast. Garret, I think you have a lot to offer, and I would like to talk with you offline about maybe if you want some help on how you can leverage some of the, intellectual property you have, because you have a lot of information. The only thing I'm really concerned about is I look at that plant over your right shoulder, and
yes,
it looks a little
there's
sad.
some brown spots on it. I need to give it some loving.
Yeah. Otherwise this was perfect. But no, great job. I really appreciate you sharing the way you did. And I visualize you, getting you zoomed into one of our classes and talking to vets. There's a brotherhood there and a sisterhood as well. I think that's real important. And, that's why half our team are vets, because, I know as a guy in recovery and old white Jewish guy, every time you get in a group where you've got something that you can, connect with people, there's a symbiotic, innate trust that happens if you continue with it, it builds, and it doesn't happen sometimes when you belong to a different club. And I've seen it with professional doctors and lawyers and ball players and musicians. They all kind of feel safe within their with the guardrails of people that they understand have been through what they've been through. And if that's a way to get people ingratiated and engaged to help save lives. I'm on this funeral avoidance campaign. I'm so tired of going to funerals especially when things are avoidable and people,
Right.
simple things like just someone like you'll hear in Fred's closing today that we share with people that we think is, just an easy way to say, hey, we care. And I have at least, I got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I'll do what I can to listen, if that helps.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Okay, Garret, thank you very much for joining us today. This is your Crisis Coach podcast with Scott H. Silverman and me, Fred Carroll. And if no one has told you they love you today, we love you, and we will talk to you again next week. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and Fred Carroll. An addiction recovery and mental wellness discussion.